Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Mirror of Intimacy today, February 2nd. It's an exciting month of February because February is the month of love, right? And for some people that can be really lovely and fun and exciting, and for others it can be distressing. I know for people that are single, sometimes they feel pressured by the holiday of Valentine's Day, and if you've been in a long-term relationship that's having some trouble or struggles, Valentine's Day can be challenging. So it's really a holiday for lovers and for children, and for those of us who also can think about humility in a way of loving all of those around us, not just an object of desire. So that said, I think probably many of you know, because you get our emails, that Mirror of Intimacy is now available on Amazon.com in hardcover, and this is a gift-quality book that's an exquisite gift for holiday gift-giving, especially Valentine's Day. So if you haven't bought your Valentine's Day gifts yet for friends, girlfriends, loved ones, a lover, please think of our book. So today we're going to talk about humility, and as usual, if you have any questions or you want to text me a thought that I can share with a larger group, please do so, and I will do my best to answer it. I was noticing that we don't have a crowd as big as we usually have for these conversations, and I think it's because this is a very challenging topic. It's challenging for me. I think it's challenging for most of us that live in the Western world, because humility is not something that we're being taught these days. There's a lot of sort of movement towards enhancing children's self-esteem and everybody getting to be the best and everybody getting to be a shining star. And with that can come a lack of humility, a lack of being able to gauge when I'm doing a good enough job, or I'm okay, and I'm proud of what I'm doing, but I don't have to be better than the next person or think I'm better than the next person, where we get ourselves into trouble. And this can essentially be so, or especially be so, in love relationships and in sexuality. So let's take a look at the PowerPoint presentation that Tom made for us today, which, thank you, Tom. He makes all of our beautiful PowerPoints for this series. And look at the quotation by James Russell Lowell. He says, "True love is but a humble, low-born thing, and hath its food served up in earthenware. It is a thing to walk with hand in hand through the everydayness of this workday world." And when we think about love and love relationships, we often think about elation, excitement, wanting to shout it from the mountaintops that we have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, instead of thinking about it, our love being something that creates a humility in us, that we're so lucky to have a partner who tolerates our difficulties and cares about us and has our backs. And this idea about its food being served up in earthenware as opposed to gilded china reminds me of the day in and day out challenge of loving, especially when things are difficult and the going gets rough. And when the going gets rough, if we walk with humility in terms of our partner's challenges hand in hand, as opposed to judging them or thinking that we married the wrong person or there's something wrong with them, then we are more likely to have a steady relationship over time, because it is the everydayness of the workday world that we're living through in long-term relationship. It's not the highs of a newborn relationship. It's human nature to project ourselves into the world with a lot of force and a lot of purpose. And in fact, our culture demands that we do so. We are educated from early on now to be the best, to work harder, to put ourselves out there and just go for it. But this kind of stirring of energy can really split us off from who we truly are. I met a man in my travels this weekend. I was in Kansas City teaching. I'm on the faculty for an organization called the International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Professionals, and we certify people to become sex addiction therapists. And I think I just lost my internet connection. Hopefully you can hear me still and that you can wait. Okay, I'm back. There I am.
Hi, Alex.
Okay.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you. So this gentleman I met is living in the middle of the country, and he told me he grew up in Silicon Valley and that his parents worked for Hewlett-Packard, which for those of you who know, Hewlett-Packard was sort of the precursor to Apple and Steve Jobs. They were the forerunners, and that was the big discovery when computers were made. And then his brother became, did some work in the tech field, and so did his mother, and he was in college studying to be an engineer, and he realized that this was not who he was, that he actually imagined himself being a counselor. So when he was projecting himself into the world with this great force and purpose of, I'm going to be an engineer and I'm going to work in the tech world, he was in fact dislocating his true self. And luckily for him, he was able to locate his true self. And I didn't ask him how he ended up in the middle of the country, but he did. And he has a counseling practice there, and he couldn't be happier doing what's truly important for him. But you can imagine the humility it takes to walk away from a tech job, which those careers can be incredibly high-paying, to be a counselor in the Midwest, which, is sort of a nice middle-class to upper-middle-class income. So when in seeking power and pride, we present a false image of how we want to be rather than who we really are. And what we get is a false reflection back from the world, which only incites more posturing. So if, for example, I were seeking power and pride and I was looking for celebrity and for people to idealize me and put me on a pedestal, what I'm going to get back are images from people and accolades from people and expectations from people that I do more of that. And in so doing, the ego can get caught up in posturing in that way, and a lot of people end up feeling like they're frauds in the world, that it's not really who they are. And I once heard a teacher from an Eastern tradition say, be very careful about letting people build an ashram around you. And I took that to be a metaphor of people who start to believe their own PR and who start to think that they are great celebrities, what have you, and then they start to put people around them that support that mirage, and when really we're all just human beings doing the best we can. And some days we can feel really proud of ourselves, like we're doing a great job, as we should, but that needs to be balanced with some humility. It needs to be balanced with some average day-to-day recognition of who we are. So I was gone teaching this class over the weekend, and that's an example of where I am being I don't know if idealize is the right word, but I'm the teacher. So we all know that teachers are people that are respected. They're kind of in a one-up position in a university setting or a training setting. And in that milieu, people are very interested in what I have to say. They want to hear my expertise. They're just learning about the field, and so they're excited to meet me. They know I've written books. But after a 3.5-hour flight home yesterday, I walked into my house, and guess what? It was Sunday night, and there were no groceries. So guess who had to go grocery shopping and grocery food preparing for the week? And that was me. And I can get aggravated about that because, I was the big teacher for 3 days. Or I can have a sense of humility and recognize that, my role is as a householder and a wife and in part as a mother. And so the contract and the agreement I've made for myself and in my relationship is that I will tend to grocery shopping and food preparation. And there's a part of me that really enjoys that because it keeps me grounded and it has me remembering that I'm just a mortal like everybody else. So when we identify with others, we cease to be reactive, and ensuing humility can illuminate us. So that is about having empathy and recognizing that we all bleed when we hurt ourselves or cut ourselves, and there's really no separation between you and me. I may know a little bit more or have an expertise in one particular area, but when it comes to another area, you may know a lot more than I do. And when we can meet each other in that way, way, we're actually having a much more open experience with each other. Oh, gosh. I hit the wrong button. Sorry. Okay. So any questions about this? Okay. Well, our coping mechanisms might have served to protect us through childhood, and that's typically the case. But in adult relationships, any self-defenses, as we've talked about endlessly in these conversations, will definitely block the light of intimacy. And this happens in professional organizations. It happens in academics where one group of people thinks they know better than the other group of people. There's often jockeying for position as opposed to really being empathic for the other person's struggle and plight. And, I know that I'm working incredibly hard, but I'm not the only one who's working hard today. We're all working hard. We're all out of time. We're all stretched in so many different directions. So not carrying that as a defense mechanism or a martyr position, but recognizing that we're all in the same boat and soup together. And humility is often an overlooked relational quality, and I also think it's an undervalued quality, especially where, as contentment is also, that we're on the move constantly, and we don't think about being or having humility or being humble or having contentment. We're always looking to be in first place, and maybe being in second, third place, or no place is just fine, depending on where we are in our lives. So I think it would be useful to take a moment right now for you to take stock of where you think you are in relation to your, quote, success and your humility. And if you have a thought, if you would text it to me, that would be great. Any thoughts, ideas? Well, then I'll continue on. We contain all positive and negative potencies within us. So why point the finger at somebody else? Oftentimes, if we get jealous, we will start to demean or devalue or gossip about somebody else, thinking, and that's usually coming from a place of inadequacy, thinking that somebody has something I don't have, as opposed to keeping my focus on what I do have. What are your own unique abilities? What are your positive qualities? And how can you build on those, as opposed to pointing the finger at somebody else and blaming them or degrading them in some way? Jennifer writes, I feel I am in reality, which keeps me balanced, so it can be boring. It's true. Being in reality means tending to these simple things in life, chopping wood and carrying water, as it were, and that keeps us right-sized. And it can be boring, especially if we're not in gratitude for the fact that we have a washing machine to do laundry in and we have running water. And so many people have so much less than we have, especially in our country. I saw the movie American Sniper over this last week also, and it brought up a lot of different feelings, but one of which was the recognition of how privileged we really are in our country, just enormously privileged, and to have some humility around that, as opposed to feeling like we need more somehow or we're not doing a good enough job. And I think it's in that gratitude that it gets a little bit less boring, that we start to see some extraordinary aspects in what seems quite ordinary. So we're moving from the narcissism that secretly says, that's not me, to silently affirming, I am that, with every situation that presents itself. So every judgment that comes forward, every time we think we're better than somebody, the time we think somebody is really tooting their own horn and I would never do it that way, we really have to look inside and say, well, that person represents an aspect of myself, and sometimes I do it that way, and it's okay. And it goes back to the adage from Al-Anon that what others think of me is none of my business. My business is to constantly be in a place of self-reflexivity where I ask myself, am I walking with humility or with hubris? And that doesn't mean I don't get to celebrate and be excited for my accomplishments, but flashing them and exhibiting them in ways that make other people feel diminished is not really true power. So somebody writes, I tend to see things as all or nothing. The glass is either full or less than full, all full or less than full. And I would say that the glass is always full because even if it's got half liquid and half air in it, it's full. It's full of something. And so this all or nothing polarity oftentimes is born out of anxiety or a need to control things, as opposed to right here, right now, today, in the middle, I'm just fine. But I would invite you to track the impulses in your body and the sensations in your body. And I'm not talking about feelings like happy, sad, glad. I'm talking about noticing if there's any tightness in your chest or a queasy feeling in your gut or feelings of emptiness or vacancy or you locate tension somewhere in the body. These are impulses and sensations that are informing you of probably something that happened in the past or what's happening in the present that you're having a difficult time tolerating. And when you can sink into your very body, that is yourself. Your true self lives in your body. It's integrated with the brain. It's not just the mind that spins these tales about all or nothing or good or bad. That's way up top here. But when you go down into the body, into the living, breathing body, that's where you contact your true self and have self-awareness. And it's in that you can start to ask yourself, what is the body saying right now? What am I really feeling? What's really true for me? So Tom said we had our first book signing, and it brought up a lot of shame in him, honestly, to put a public face on this work. He said, I felt unworthy, and my sponsor let me know that I was having a lack of humility, even though I was devaluing myself, but I wasn't in service to others in those moments. And that's a really sophisticated thought. You kind of have to wrap your head around that because I've had that experience, too, where I've published an article, and then I feel shame about it, about, being good enough and what are other people going to think, and did I get it right? And in that, there's a devaluing, but I'm not allowing other people to say, hey, well done, or wow, that was interesting, or I really appreciate your work. That kind of lack of humility can be a defense against receiving from other people. So there's a part of it that can start to spin into being self-centered. So tolerating, other people telling you that you've done a good job and being able to take that in pushes up against these shame reactions and forces us to have some humility around what we have accomplished. And humility can commonly be confused with self-deprecation or servility, but its derivation comes from the Latin word humus, which has to do with the earth. And that reminds us to be humble or to be grounded, which is what I've been talking about. And only truth makes humility possible. It gives us the ability to touch the inner authenticity of our inner earth, or the authenticity of our inner earth and our groundedness, which is precisely what Tom was pointing to, that when we touch who we really are and we get grounded, then it gets us out of shame. It gets us out of hubris on the other extreme, and it allows us just to be here right now. There was a book from transactional analysis in the 60s or 70s called I'm Okay, You're Okay, and that's probably the most humble middle ground to sit in, that I'm okay and you're okay. We're both fine as we are. We're just different, and we're both bringing a different conversation to the party. To share how we receive our thoughts and knowledge rather than what we believe invites in the truth that we are still growing, still finding more about ourselves each day. So when we share how we receive our thoughts, how we learn, as opposed to what we believe in, then it allows us to be curious and grow. If I just tell you that this is how it is, or this is how humility is, or this is how truth and transparency grows, then that's a very closed system and it's egoic. As opposed to me sort of muddling through this conversation with you and talking to you about where I struggle with it, when I don't, allowing you to be transparent in the self-same way, then we are in a growth experiencing proposition. And of course, this is what we want in our relationships also. We don't want to be telling our partners how we think they should be or what's wrong with them. Instead, we want to share our own experiences with them, and we want to be curious about their experience. How did they come to do that thing that seemed so wacky or off to us, or maybe even we have a gross judgment about it. We just think it's full-on wrong. How can we say, wait a minute, this person is not that different than me. We both just have our different foibles and peccadillos. And how do I meet him or her and ask in a curious way about how they came to know that or believe that, and talk about how I came to my process also. So in that spirit, instead of saying, this thought came to me, or rather, saying this thought came to me as if it arose, as if it emerged. And often it emerges in conversation with one another. So it's not just me constructing it, we're in a co-construction of it. Then rather than think, I think this, or I know this, or this is my truth. That transparency to share your mental process as you experience it with one another is an act of humility. And I'll tell you, that's how Tom and I wrote Mirror of Intimacy. We didn't impose our thoughts on one another. We would write different meditations on different days and think, wow, that's really curious, or that's interesting, or boy, this is just coming through me. Is it coming through you? And it was emerging between the two of us. It wasn't that one of us knew something absolutely and the other knew something absolutely. And because of that, the book itself has a ring of openness to it. It has a ring of maybe, dare I say, somebody channeling it, because people ask us all the time, who wrote these meditations? Which is funny because our names are on the book, our names are on the emails, but people ask us all the time where we got them or who wrote them, as if they came out of the ether. And where Tom and I are concerned, they kind of did, because we marvel at how much material came out of the two of us. But it was because it was coming to us, not because we already knew it. So John writes that I came to believe at an early age that I did not deserve to be loved. It is deeply rooted. Intellectually, I know this is twisted, but so far I'm unable to let go of this programming. And so that is a very, very difficult thought to have, and as I read this, it pains me, honestly. I feel it in my own body. I feel a little bit of a closing in my heart and a sadness, because it couldn't be further from the truth, no matter who you are. And no matter how much I say that, I know it's not going to change for you how it makes you feel. So I really want to encourage you to work with a therapist who's somatically oriented, someone who's not going to talk to you that much, but who's really going to direct you down into your body so you can start to locate where these feelings of vacancy and emptiness, shame, and possibly self-loathing are. Because the act of putting your awareness on this in a relational way, in what I call an embodied relational mindfulness, meaning you're in your body, you're in relation to someone else, and you're mindful because you're tracking what these sensations are and noticing the emptiness or the feeling of not being loved. Those acts of practice start to change this because your brain and body start to function in more complexity. And so some part of you is dissociated. And I'm not supposed to diagnose people online or that I don't know, but I don't even see you, much less know you. So I'm just speaking in terms of general neuroscience principles, that the act of putting your attention on these matters and being in relationship with a relational therapist will help you start to retrieve those parts of yourself that have been split off. So this is very important work, and I hope that you can take care of yourself in that way. But cognitive interventions, saying affirmations, are not enough for you. My guess is you've done a lot of work around this, or you wouldn't even be on this call. You wouldn't have found it. So please do yourself a service and find someone who can truly help you with this. I would direct you to the work of Pat Ogden, whose people are trained in somatosensory psychotherapy, or Peter Levine, whose people are trained in somatic experiencing.
All attendees are unmuted.
Oh, okay, so you're unmuted now. So if you have any questions, this is a good time to ask it. And there are a lot of you out there. So.
Hi, my name is Colleen, and could you repeat the two things you said? Book of somatic experience, or the type of therapy?
I'm going to type it in right here. So
I don't have access to the internet, though. I'm just over the phone.
Oh, okay. So it's somatic experiencing.
Okay.
So you would look for a therapist who practice somatic experiencing, and then one somatosensory. Psychotherapy.
Thank you.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. My name is Jill, and I am partner of a sex addict and have been for 35 years married, and we're both in recovery now. Is it fair, do you think, that we're two sides of the same coin?
I'm sorry, Jill, will you say that again? You sort of cut out.
Sure. Do you think that it's useful to contextualize, our relationship in terms of we're two sides to the same coin?
In what way? In what way?
Okay, my partner being a sex addict and me being a partner to a sex addict. I mean, I also believe I have my own love and possibly some sex addiction, I'm not sure, but I just find that it's more useful for me to look at us as, two different sides to the same coin. He's got his issues, I've got mine.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
So I just lost Jill, whoever is handling the mute and unmute, and I'd like to hear the rest of what she was saying. Somebody just muted.
All attendees are muted.
Okay, so Jill, I'm sorry I lost you. I think your question was that it's useful for you to think of the sex addict and the partner as two sides of the same coin. There are some people that would take extreme issue with that conceptualization. I'm of the mind that we have to make meaning of our lives in the way that makes the most sense for us. So I'll tell you that Pia Melody, who's done a lot of work on love addiction and sex addiction, says that oftentimes the sex addict is the love avoidant and the partner can be love addicted to the sex addict. And whether or not that's true for your marriage is up to you to discern. But I do think whether or not there is any kind of addiction in a relationship, there are usually the flip sides of the same coin. In imago therapy, the belief is that we choose our perfect imago or image so that we can work out our family of origin issues with each other. And I think that's a useful way to think about it, that we come together. There are millions, billions of people in the world, and we choose one person to marry. And the person we choose, we fall in love with for whatever reasons, and then ultimately we come to discover all sorts of things about them and ourselves we didn't know. And so marriage is a forum and a construct for us to learn and grow through the other person. And if it's helpful for you to see that the two of you are flip sides of the same coin, I actually think that's really lovely and useful for your own personal growth and development, as long as the two of you as a couple are actually using it in that way and not pathologizing yourselves because of it. So I'm delighted to hear that you're both in recovery, and I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, if you would please type in your answer, or I believe you can unmute yourself, then I'm happy to talk more with you.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Oh, so you can press *6 by unmuting yourself, because I keep getting a recording that says as much. All right, so one aspect of humility is knowing there are infinite things that we'll never know. Oh, hello, Jill, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Are you?
Oh, yay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, yes.
I'm not sure what happened, but I mean, yes, what you said is a I think accurate interpretation of what I was saying, and I appreciate. And mythologizing, what do you mean by that exactly? As long as you're
pathologizing. I said pathology, not mythology.
Okay. What did you mean by not pathologizing?
Well, by saying, well, you know, you're the sex addict, or you're the love avoidant, and I'm the love addict, and we're just flip sides of the same coin, and boy, this is just how we are. And, you know, we're damaged, as opposed to, these are interesting ways of thinking about your avoidance and my neediness, perhaps, if we think of sex addicts as avoidant and partners as needy, which, again, that is not a generalization by any means. But if it's helpful for the couple to look at that and say, I need to manage my anxiety more about my neediness, and you need to look at how you run and hide from taking care of me and loving me and being empathic for the betrayal and what you've done to me. And if we can meet each other in the middle in that way, where I'm starting to regulate myself more, and my husband, the addict, is regulating himself less in terms of down-regulation and avoiding, then we can start to be productive in how we move towards each other. So
okay,
I think what people do is okay, great. Because people can take terms and then put themselves in these boxes and say, well, you know, you're a sex addict and I'm a partner and here we are. And it can be an excuse. Okay.
Right, exactly. That did not work. I did that for a while. It didn't work. I couldn't make any progress with myself. And so, so you described it much better than I ever could. And that's how, and that's how I'm looking at it. And it seems like the more I do address my anxiety and my neediness, and just work on the things that are right in front of me, the more he is addressing his issues, and it almost seems miraculous to me.
Right, because you're in a system, and that's what happens. Both parties impact the system altogether, and it's hard for you not to have anxiety when he destroyed the trust in the marriage the way he did. So you're really taking a leap of faith by managing your anxiety and trusting he's going to move towards you. But typically in a system, when the person who's more needy starts to back off a little bit, it allows the other person to come forward and take their own shape more. And that's the systemic dynamic. So I'm happy to hear that you both have hung in there. I think it's, marvelous and miraculous. And I wish you both all the best. And I'm sure it's incredibly, talk about humility. To stay in a marriage where somebody has hurt you so profoundly takes a lot of humility, I think. And also for your husband to be able to fall on his sword and say, I was wrong, takes a lot of humility, and to move towards you. Yes. So good luck to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, so moving on here, we've we've been so wrong in our self-assumptions, motives, and beliefs in the past, all of us. And if we can be wrong once, we can certainly be wrong another time. So we want to be careful about that also, making assumptions. You know, that there's an old saying that making assumptions makes an ass out of me and of you. And I think that's like a high school saying or something we learned then. But it's sort of a good piece of conventional wisdom to live by. And life constantly corrects itself, but when we block the light of our mistakes and failures, we block the healing process too. So not bringing in our mistakes and failures and weaving them into the tapestry of our lives is a lack of humility. You know, there are many, many times I've been wrong in my personal relationships, in my business relationships. You know, I just did it wrong. I didn't know better. I did the best I can, or I was acting out of my anxiety, which would be acting out of ego, or thinking I was better than, or knew better. And I think that's part of maturing and growing up and getting older also, is recognizing that we all make mistakes and we all fail sometimes. And if we block that, we don't allow ourselves to grow. And this is a particular problem right now in our helicopter parenting world, where kids are not allowed to fail or make mistakes. Everybody is told how terrific they are, even when they didn't do such a great job. And when the kid says, oh, I don't feel like I did that good in my soccer game today, when the parent says, oh, you did a great job, don't worry about it, a better response would be to say to your child, well, what do you think you could have done better? Or what do you think that you did wrong? And then to say to them, yeah, you know, I kind of saw you getting tripped up over your own feet, and that's okay. That's part of learning. But being able to tolerate that your child is having a hard time or failing or maybe not that coordinated. Maybe your child's not going to be a professional soccer player. Oh, well. But to really engage them and asking them and letting them be transparent about their mistakes and failure, that makes for a more humble, well-rounded human being, as opposed to building a narcissist by telling them that they're great at every single turn. Because life will correct itself. That child will go to college, and it won't have the parents helicoptering around and telling them how great they are, and they'll run around with hubris and no humility, and they will quickly find that they flunk out, or they don't have friends, or people don't like them, or any number of other things will befall them. So when you are goofed up, when your feet are getting twisted around on the soccer field, take a deep breath and discover that tomorrow, requires and also brings us the humility of self-renewal, that today is not the end of the world. You goof up today. There's always a new day. And there's always, I'm sorry. There's always, being able to have enough humility to say, I'm sorry, to make an apology. And we can apologize and forgive people who have harmed us, who we don't respect or like, but we don't have to carry around this hatred or vitriol or consider that we have enemies or anything like that. We can put ourselves, our own souls and selves at peace for the mistakes we've made, for the times that maybe we've been jerks, and forgive ourselves and have an open-heartedness toward that person, not wish them ill or wish them hurting themselves, but that doesn't mean you have to be friends with them or you have to necessarily repair the relationship in that way. You can have a cordial relationship with them and get on with your life. It's not the end of the world. So finally, this is a reminder to those of you who have bought our book to please share a review on Amazon, even if you write one sentence or two sentences about what the book has meant to you, how you've contributed to the book maybe, what impact it's had on your relationships. That would be a very generous way for you to give back to us. And thank you again for supporting the book in all the ways that all of you have. And please remember that this is the best Valentine's Day gift out there. And I'm saying that with a little bit of hubris and some humility, too, when I say that. So any other questions before we end today? We still have some time. Thoughts about humility, concerns, questions? John says, thank you. These are wonderfully helpful sessions. Well, they're helpful to me, too. It's really nice for me to be able to constructively think about these topics because these are aspirations. And this is one of the things that we mentioned in our introduction, that if Tom and I were living in perfect harmony with every one of these topics every day in this book, we would probably be dead or angels or I don't know what. But these are aspirations. These are desires we all have for living a healthy, balanced life and being healthy, balanced people. So don't think for one moment that he or I have this wired or we've got it all figured out. It's very helpful for me to have these conversations because it will remind me today to walk with humility with those I meet, those I do therapy with my colleagues, with my staff, and it's a gift that I get in return also. So thank you.
Is it possible to ask one more question?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, good. I'm Bianca Rucker. I'm a sex therapist in Vancouver.
Hi,
and
Bianca.
I've enjoyed listening to portions of this. My question is actually about what you were talking about not holding on to anger and being able to be cordial to someone. What happens if it's a family member, a sibling, that you're angry with, in terms of, I often wonder if there's more effort that should be made than just being cordial and distant if it's a sibling.
Right. Well, I have this in my family in various configurations, and the way I've stayed in relationship with everybody is by having to work these things out with myself, because many people don't have the capacity to be in a constructive, intimate conversation. If I were to confront you as a colleague and I said to you, Bianca, we've really had some difficulty lately, and I've been upset about the way you've been handling this case we've been working on, and this is what I think happened, and can we talk about it? And you and I cared about enough the relationship, you would say yes, and then I would tell you what my perceptions and projections were, and you would listen, and then you would tell me what yours were, and then we would come to a clearing, and we would both apologize, and hopefully that would build an intimacy between the two of us, right? And then we could go forward and actually deepen our friendship, relationship, professional relationship. But with family members who get defensive and they say, well, what do you mean you hurt my feelings, or I hurt your feelings, or they interrupt when you're talking, or they already have a defense for what was going on, I know that conversation is not going to go very far, and if anything, it may make the relationship worse. So I either do some journaling around it, or I try and find a way to forgive them and recognize that that person has limitations. I can love them for the essence of who they are, because for me, and this is not true for everybody, staying in relationship with my family members means more to me than cutting them off and not having a relationship with them at all. So broken and disjointed as they might be, I'd rather have them and have the history with them and the laughs I can have with them on occasion than not have them around. So I have to write things internally for me, and that doesn't mean that I'm not angry, or I don't feel self-righteous, or I don't think I'm more psychologically evolved than they are, but it does mean that I have to put it aside. So maybe I'm taking the high road, and at the same time I have to have humility, which is really a paradox, one of a million that we live with, in order to stay relational with them. And that's the best I can do. And what I find, too, is that we all age and grow over time. It tends to soften around the edges for everybody, too. Does that help?
Yeah, that is. That's a good way to articulate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks for asking that question. It's a tough one, believe me. Somebody wants to know how I pronounce. Oh, yeah?
An additional question, if there's still time. My name's Amanda, and I was just going to ask your thoughts on Pia Melody's Shame, Existence, Find, and how you see humility or kind of a reasonable amount of shame or guilt as kind of an antidote to that, or how those two might interplay with each other.
Well, I think, if I understand this correctly, that the shame existence bind has to do what Pia calls carried shame. And it's not really our shame. It's shame that we picked up along the way, or it's intergenerationally transmitted. So when we can give that shame back to the person who gave it to us, it frees us to be healthy and more solid internally. And I think I just lost my train of thought about what you just asked. You're asking, how does shame tie into humility?
Or how could one person kind of practice healthy shame or humility as an antidote to the carried shame?
Okay, right. So she does distinguish between healthy shame and toxic shame. Other people think there's no place for shame. I have an opinion about that because shame is deeply encoded in the autonomic nervous system, and it's a pro-social function that comes into play as soon as the child is able to toddle. So when the baby reaches for a dangerous object and it's in a highly valent state, there's a lot of dopamine, it's excited, it's kind of waddling towards you, and it's got a knife in its hand, and the mother has a look of horror on her face, that is shame. And the infant immediately starts to, its system starts to go down, and it may even start to cry because the mother's just shamed it out of its sort of narcissistic omnipotence, if you will. But the mother does that because the knife is a dangerous object. She's saying no. And when she can repair that rupture immediately and regulate the child's nervous system again, you have a healthy imbuing of pro-social shame. So we learned that we don't run around with knives poking at people or steal things or put our hands on hot burners or punch people in the face. So what Pia says is that sex addicts are shameless. They are shameless in their behavior, which is accurate. They don't have appropriate shame about what they're doing and how they're harming people. So having appropriate shame is also in some ways about having some humility, that I wouldn't go into a store and steal something. I feel shame about that. I saw a man in the grocery store yesterday take a grape and eat it to see whether the grapes were good or not. Now, my father is Greek, and I grew up with him checking out the produce in the grocery store to make sure it was good because he grew up in open-air markets. So he was sort of shameless about eating produce in grocery stores. And I, of course, adopted that habit. So it seems like a grape is harmless, but eating an entire apple without asking somebody in produce starts to feel a little shameless to me, and my humility is such that I would ask one of the people that worked in produce if they would cut an apple and let me have a taste of it. So that's how I see all of this working together, that we have to be discerning and we have to have discernment about being humble, having appropriate shame, as opposed to having hubris and being shameless in our activities. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so we are going to have to stop in a few minutes here. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to email us or call the office. Again, the number is 310-843-9902 for CHS, and our intake counselors are always available to talk to you about issues around relationships, sex, and sexuality. Somebody asked how I pronounce my last name. It's Katehakis. So thank you for asking. And I hope you all have a fantastic February and a happy Valentine's Day to all of you, and thank you.